Marcus Chen floated in the containment field, his body held motionless by invisible forces that pressed against his skin like cold honey. The alien technology was beyond anything Earth had ever dreamed of creating. Around him, the vast prison ship Nexus Mortis hummed with power that could fuel entire star systems. The Zephyrian guard approached Marcus's cell with the casual arrogance typical of his species. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, Corvex possessed 4 arms that ended in razor-sharp claws and skin that shifted color with his emotions. Right now, it glowed a deep purple that Marcus had learned meant amusement. "The little human still believes he matters," Corvex clicked through his translation device. His voice carried the mechanical undertone that all alien speech received when processed through the universal translator implanted behind Marcus's left ear. "Look at it, Draxus, so small and weak." Draxus, a crystalline being from the Shatter Worlds, chimed his response in frequencies that sounded like breaking glass. "I cannot understand why the Council even bothers with these creatures. They have no natural weapons, no enhanced abilities, no psychic powers. They are barely evolved beyond the animals they once were." Marcus said nothing. He had learned that speaking only brought more mockery. Instead, he watched and listened. Every detail about this prison might one day prove useful. The guards spoke freely around him because they considered humans too primitive to understand advanced concepts like quantum-locked containment fields or dimensional phase technology. They were wrong about many things. The Nexus Mortis was a marvel of engineering that held the most dangerous criminals from across the galaxy. The ship itself existed in a pocket of folded space-time, making it impossible to locate from normal space. Each cell used different technology designed to hold specific types of beings. Energy beings were contained in electromagnetic bottles. Psychic entities were held in psi-dampening chambers. Physical beings like Marcus were suspended in quantum fields that prevented all movement while keeping them perfectly preserved. According to the guards, no one had ever escaped from the Nexus Mortis in its 1,000-year history. The ship was a legend among criminals and law enforcement alike. Being sent here was considered a fate worse than death, because death, at least, was an ending. Marcus had been here for 6 months, Earth time. He knew this because he had been counting heartbeats since his arrival. Humans might lack the natural abilities of other species, but they possessed something else. An obsessive attention to detail, and an inability to simply accept their circumstances. The charges against him were war crimes, though Marcus knew the truth was more complicated. He had been the tactical officer aboard the human exploration vessel New Horizon when they encountered the Hegemony patrol fleet. The aliens had demanded immediate surrender and had been prepared to destroy the human ship to study its occupants. Marcus had implemented a strategy that saved his crew, but resulted in significant hegemony casualties. The aliens called it unprovoked aggression. Marcus called it self-defense. The truth, as usual in war, lay somewhere between the extremes. "Tell me, human," Corvex said, moving closer to the containment field. "Do you still dream of your little blue world? Do you imagine your species mounting some glorious rescue mission?" Marcus focused on keeping his expression neutral, though inside he felt the familiar surge of determination that had carried him through 15 years of military service. Earth didn't even know where he was. The Nexus Mortis existed outside normal space, and even if Earth's limited faster-than-light technology could reach this far, they would never find him. "I think it dreams of returning to the trees," Draxus added with a sound like wind chimes in a hurricane. "Perhaps we should adjust its containment to include some branches and fruit." The 2 guards dissolved into what Marcus assumed was laughter. Corvex's skin shifted through several colors, while Draxus's crystalline structure rang with harmonic frequencies. They moved away to torment other prisoners, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts. The human studied his surroundings with the methodical approach that had made him one of Earth's most effective tactical officers. The containment field that held him was generated by 4 emitters positioned at the corners of his cell. Each emitter was about the size of his fist and glowed with internal light that pulsed in a complex pattern. The pattern was not random, Marcus had realized during his 3rd week of imprisonment. It followed a mathematical sequence that repeated every 47 minutes and 33 seconds. The walls of his cell appeared to be made of some kind of smart matter that could be reconfigured as needed. Yesterday, the guards had demonstrated this by temporarily reshaping Marcus's cell into a perfect sphere just to watch him adapt to the disorientation. The floor, ceiling, and walls all glowed with the same soft light as the containment emitters, suggesting they were part of the same technological system. Outside his cell, Marcus could see portions of the prison ship's interior through a transparent barrier that might have been force field technology or some kind of exotic matter. The Nexus Mortis was enormous, with multiple levels extending in all directions. Thousands of cells held beings from hundreds of different species. Some prisoners had been here for centuries, according to the guards' casual conversations. Marcus had identified at least 60 different species during his time here. Many he recognized from intelligence briefings during his military service, but others were completely unknown. The galaxy was far more crowded than Earth had realized. Humanity's first tentative steps into interstellar space had revealed a universe teeming with intelligent life, most of it organized under the authority of something called the hegemony. The hegemony was a vast confederation of species that had been expanding for millennia. They claimed to bring order and civilization to primitive worlds, but Marcus had seen enough evidence to know they were essentially cosmic bullies who used superior technology to force compliance from younger civilizations. Earth had been scheduled for integration into the hegemony, which meant the complete surrender of human autonomy in exchange for advanced technology and protection. The human government had been prepared to accept these terms until the incident with the New Horizon. Now Earth was considered a rogue world harboring dangerous criminals. Marcus suspected his homeworld was facing much more serious problems than his imprisonment, but there was nothing he could do about that from inside a quantum containment field. He focused his attention on the containment system itself. The field that held him was incredibly sophisticated, but all technology had limitations. The question was whether those limitations could be exploited by someone who understood the principles involved. Marcus had degrees in physics and military engineering from the Solar Defense Academy. He had spent years studying alien technology recovered from various encounters, trying to understand how species with thousands of years of advancement had achieved such remarkable capabilities. Most of his colleagues assumed that alien technology was simply too advanced for human understanding, but Marcus had always believed that the fundamental laws of physics remained constant, regardless of who was applying them. The containment field worked by creating localized distortions in space-time that held matter in a fixed position relative to the ship's reference frame. The technology was elegant and almost perfectly efficient, but it required constant adjustment to maintain stability. Marcus had observed that the field strength fluctuated slightly every time the ship changed course or velocity, suggesting that the system was not entirely immune to external influences. More importantly, the field generators themselves were subject to the same physical laws as any other technology. They generated heat, consumed power, and operated within specific parameters. If those parameters could be exceeded or disrupted, the containment field might fail. The challenge was that Marcus had no tools, no allies, and no way to physically interact with his environment. The containment field prevented him from moving anything except his eyes and the muscles required for breathing. Even his heart rate was partially regulated by the field to prevent any possibility of self-harm or medical emergency that might require intervention, but humans had always been good at making tools from whatever materials were available. and Marcus had been thinking about this problem for 6 months, analyzing every detail of his imprisonment with the focused intensity that had made him one of Earth's most decorated officers. The first thing he had noticed was that the containment field was not perfectly uniform. There were minor variations in field strength that correlated with his biological functions. When his heart rate increased, the field compensated by tightening slightly around his torso. When he took a deep breath, the field adjusted to accommodate the expansion of his chest. The system was designed to maintain his physical condition while preventing any purposeful movement, but it had to respond to normal biological variation. The second thing he had discovered was that the field's response time was not instantaneous. There was a tiny delay, measured in milliseconds, between biological changes and field adjustments. This delay was probably undetectable to most species, but humans had evolved as persistence hunters who could track minute changes over vast periods of time. Marcus had spent weeks learning to perceive this delay and understand its implications. The third discovery was the most significant. The containment field could be influenced by electromagnetic phenomena generated within his own body. Human nervous systems operated on electrical impulses, and while the field was designed to contain gross physical movement, it was not perfectly calibrated for the bioelectric activity of human physiology. Most alien species had different neurological structures than humans. Their thought patterns literally operated on different frequencies and intensities. The containment field was designed to accommodate the electromagnetic signatures of known species, but humans were new enough to the galactic community that their specific bioelectric characteristics had not been fully incorporated into the system's parameters. Marcus had discovered this by accident during his second month of imprisonment. He had been trying to maintain his mental conditioning through memory exercises when he noticed that certain types of concentration affected the field's stability in microscopic ways. Deep meditation caused tiny fluctuations in field strength around his head. Intense focus on mathematical problems created different fluctuations. Most remarkably, the specific mental state he entered during combat planning produced effects that the system seemed unable to properly compensate for. This made sense from an evolutionary perspective. Humans had developed their intelligence in response to environmental pressures that required rapid problem-solving under stress. The mental state that Marcus entered when planning tactical operations was optimized for processing vast amounts of information very quickly while maintaining perfect clarity of thought. His brain activity during these periods was probably unlike anything the field's designers had encountered. Over the following months, Marcus had learned to deliberately trigger this mental state and sustain it for extended periods. Each time, the containment field struggled slightly to maintain perfect stability. The fluctuations were tiny, but they were consistent and cumulative. More importantly, they followed patterns that Marcus was beginning to understand. He had also been studying the guards and their routines. Corvex and Draxus were part of a security rotation that included 12 different beings working in pairs. Each pair worked 8-hour shifts according to standard hegemony timekeeping, and each had slightly different procedures and personalities. Some guards were more attentive than others. Some were more likely to engage in conversation with prisoners. Some were focused on their duties, while others were clearly just passing time until their shifts ended. Corvex and Draxus were among the most arrogant guards, which made them perfect for Marcus's purposes. They considered humans so beneath their notice that they often discussed sensitive information within earshot of his cell. Over the months, Marcus had learned about shift changes, security protocols, emergency procedures, and maintenance schedules. He knew which guards carried override codes for containment systems, which ones had access to ship operations, and which ones were lazy enough to cut corners on their assigned tasks. The maintenance schedule was particularly interesting. Every 72 hours, automated systems performed diagnostic checks on all containment fields. During these checks, each field was briefly cycled through various test patterns to verify operational integrity. The process took approximately 3 minutes per cell and was staggered throughout the ship to avoid overloading the power systems. Marcus's cell was scheduled for maintenance every Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, according to Earth's calendar system, which he had been maintaining through his heartbeat counting. Tomorrow was Thursday, which meant his containment field would be tested in approximately 18 hours. During the diagnostic cycle, his containment field would be subjected to deliberate variations in strength and configuration. If Marcus could synchronize his bioelectric manipulation with the diagnostic sequence, he might be able to create a resonance effect that would amplify the field fluctuations beyond their normal parameters. It was a desperate plan with very low probability of success. Even if he could destabilize his containment field enough to allow movement, he would still be trapped in a cell aboard a prison ship surrounded by thousands of hostile aliens. He had no weapons, no tools, no allies, and no detailed knowledge of the ship's layout beyond what he could observe from his cell. But Marcus Chen had not survived 15 years of military service by avoiding desperate situations. Sometimes the only choice was between certain death and almost certain death, and humans had always chosen to fight regardless of the odds. He began preparing his mind for what might be his only chance at freedom. The next 18 hours would determine whether he died as a forgotten prisoner in an alien cell or lived long enough to show the galaxy what humans could accomplish when they refused to surrender. The guards had been right about one thing. Marcus did dream of Earth, but he also dreamed of proving that they had made a serious mistake when they decided to mock a human soldier who had nothing left to lose except his determination to return home. The maintenance cycle began at exactly 1447, according to Marcus's internal chronometer. He felt the familiar sensation as his containment field shifted into diagnostic mode, cycling through different configurations like a massive invisible hand testing its grip on his body. This was the moment he had spent months preparing for. Marcus entered the focused mental state he had developed through years of tactical planning, pushing his consciousness into the crystalline clarity that had made him Earth's most effective combat strategist. His brain activity spiked as millions of neural pathways fired in the specific pattern that the containment system could not properly compensate for. The field fluctuations began immediately, tiny variations in the invisible forces that held him suspended. Marcus deepened his concentration, visualizing complex mathematical sequences while simultaneously running through detailed tactical scenarios. His mind became a biological computer operating at frequencies the alien designers had never encountered. The containment field started to struggle. Microscopic adjustments became larger corrections, as the system fought to maintain stability against bioelectric interference it could not understand. Marcus felt the grip around his body loosening slightly, then tightening again as the field's automatic systems attempted to compensate. He pushed harder, driving his mind into the state he had reached during humanity's most desperate battles. The field began to oscillate, invisible waves of force rippling through the quantum matrices that held him prisoner. The oscillations grew stronger with each second, feeding on themselves as the system's own feedback loops amplified the interference. Suddenly, the containment field collapsed. Marcus dropped 6 inches before catching himself, his body free for the first time in over 6 months. His muscles screamed in protest as blood flow returned to normal, but he ignored the pain. He had perhaps 30 seconds before the automatic systems detected the failure and triggered emergency protocols. Moving with the fluid efficiency that had earned him recognition throughout the Solar Defense Forces, Marcus examined the containment field emitters. Each device was about the size of his fist, made from some kind of crystalline material that pulsed with internal energy. They were mounted on adjustable brackets that allowed fine-tuning of field geometry. Marcus grabbed the nearest emitter and twisted it sharply clockwise. The device came free with a satisfying click, its crystalline structure still glowing but no longer connected to the power grid. He had gambled correctly that the mounting system would prioritize easy maintenance access over security, since no prisoner had ever been free to tamper with the equipment. Alarms began sounding throughout the ship, a warbling tone that hurt his ears and made his bones vibrate. Emergency lighting bathed everything in pulsing red illumination. Marcus heard the heavy footsteps of guards running toward his cell block, their voices raised in apparent confusion and alarm. The transparent barrier that formed the front wall of his cell was still active, but Marcus had studied its operation during the countless hours he had spent watching the guards. It was controlled by a simple palm scanner mounted beside the cell entrance. The scanner was designed to read the genetic signatures of authorized personnel, but Marcus had observed something important about its operation. The device worked by analyzing skin cells and DNA traces left on its surface. When guards placed their hands on the scanner, it sampled microscopic amounts of biological material and compared the genetic patterns to its database of authorized users. But the scanner also retained traces of previous users for several minutes to allow for rapid access by multiple guards without requiring perfect cleaning between uses. Corvex had used this scanner less than an hour ago during his routine patrol. Some of his skin cells would still be present on the scanner surface, and Marcus had noticed that the Zephyrian's four-handed physiology meant he often left more biological material than necessary when operating human-designed interfaces. Marcus pressed the disconnected field emitter against the palm scanner, using the device's crystalline structure to scrape microscopic samples from the scanner surface. The emitter's quantum properties might be enough to fool the relatively simple genetic analyzer, especially if it could detect traces of Corvex's DNA. The scanner flickered, its display cycling through various symbols that Marcus could not read. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the transparent barrier dissolved with a sound like breaking glass, leaving the cell entrance completely open. Marcus stepped into the corridor for the first time since his imprisonment began. The Nexus Mortis stretched away in both directions, a vast tubular structure lined with thousands of cells containing beings from across the galaxy. Emergency lighting cast everything in harsh shadows that seemed to move and shift as the alarm system continued its urgent warnings. He could hear guards approaching from multiple directions, their various forms of communication creating a cacophony of clicks, chimes, roars, and electronic sounds. Marcus estimated he had perhaps 2 minutes before the first security team reached his position. 2 minutes to cover 6 months of planning into action. The human moved toward the nearest intersection, staying close to the wall and using the irregular lighting to mask his approach. His bare feet made no sound on the smooth floor material, and his prison clothing was designed to be as unremarkable as possible. The advantages were small, but potentially significant. At the intersection, Marcus encountered his first major obstacle. A security checkpoint blocked access to the ship's main corridors, operated by 2 guards he had never seen before. They were members of a species he could not identify, tall and thin with too many joints in their arms and legs. They moved with jerky, mechanical precision that suggested cybernetic enhancement. The checkpoint consisted of an energy barrier similar to his cell door, controlled by a more sophisticated scanner system. Getting past it would require either proper authorization or significant force, neither of which Marcus possessed. But he had spent months studying the prison's emergency protocols by listening to guard conversations and observing their responses to various situations. Every security system had built-in vulnerabilities designed to prevent catastrophic failures during emergencies. The Nexus Mortis was no exception. If the ship lost power or suffered system failures, all barriers had to be capable of manual override to prevent guards and essential personnel from being trapped in dangerous areas. Marcus looked around until he spotted what he was seeking, an emergency access panel mounted about 8 feet up the wall near the checkpoint. The panel was marked with symbols he could not read, but its purpose was obviously similar to emergency systems aboard human vessels. It would contain manual overrides for local security barriers, probably requiring some kind of tool or key that guards would carry. The problem was reaching it. At 8 feet, the panel was well beyond Marcus's reach even if he jumped. But the corridor walls were lined with various fixtures and equipment that might serve as handholds. Marcus studied the wall carefully, tracing a path that would let him climb to the access panel. The guards at the checkpoint had noticed the alarms and were speaking rapidly to each other in high-pitched voices that sounded like machine static. They seemed focused on their communication devices, probably receiving instructions from their supervisors about the escaped prisoner. Marcus had perhaps 30 seconds before they noticed him. He moved quickly but carefully, using a waste disposal unit as a step to reach a ventilation grate, then pulling himself up to grab a light fixture that supported his weight just long enough for him to reach the emergency panel. His fingers found the edge of the panel and pulled it open, revealing a collection of switches, buttons, and devices he did not recognize. One of the guards looked up just as Marcus's hand touched what appeared to be a manual release lever. The alien made a sound like a saw cutting metal and reached for what was obviously a weapon, but Marcus was already pulling the lever down with all his strength. The checkpoint barrier disappeared instantly, along with every other energy barrier visible in the corridor. Emergency lighting grew brighter as backup power systems activated. Somewhere in the distance, Marcus heard the distinctive sound of cell doors opening and prisoners shouting in dozens of different languages and communication methods. He had just triggered a prison break involving thousands of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. Marcus dropped from the wall and sprinted through the deactivated checkpoint before the guards could react. Behind him, he heard weapons fire and the sounds of multiple species expressing surprise, anger, and confusion in ways that ranged from musical to terrifying. The prison ship's corridors erupted into chaos as beings who had been contained for decades or centuries suddenly found themselves free to move. The human ran through corridors that branched and twisted in ways that suggested the ship's internal structure was far more complex than it appeared from his cell. He passed dozens of other escaped prisoners, most of whom ignored him completely as they pursued their own agendas. A few tried to attack him, but Marcus's military training let him evade or disable them without stopping his forward progress. His destination was the ship's central core, where he hoped to find navigation systems or communication equipment that might help him understand his situation. The Nexus Mortis was enormous and existed outside normal space, but it had to have some way of returning to the galaxy when necessary. If Marcus could access those systems, he might be able to find a way home. The corridor ahead of him filled with armed guards rushing toward the cell blocks to contain the prison break. Marcus pressed himself against the wall and let them pass, counting at least 20 different beings carrying weapons that ranged from familiar energy rifles to devices he could not begin to identify. None of them paid attention to a lone human in prison clothing. As the guards disappeared around a corner, Marcus continued toward the ship's center. The architecture became more elaborate as he moved away from the prison sections, with wider corridors and more sophisticated technology visible in the walls and ceiling. He was entering areas where the ship's crew lived and worked, regions that normal prisoners would never see. A new sound caught his attention, the rhythmic pulsing of massive machinery operating under stress. The ship's power systems were struggling to cope with the demands of containing thousands of escaped prisoners while maintaining life support and basic operations. Marcus suspected that the Nexus Mortis had never been designed to handle a complete containment failure. He reached a major intersection where multiple corridors converged around a large central chamber. Through transparent walls, Marcus could see what appeared to be the ship's command center. Dozens of alien beings worked at control stations that projected holographic displays showing ship schematics, prisoner locations, and status indicators. Most of the displays were flashing red or orange, indicating serious problems throughout the vessel. The command center was heavily guarded and protected by multiple layers of security barriers. Getting inside would be nearly impossible, but Marcus noticed something interesting about its layout. The command center was positioned at the intersection of several major corridors, with viewing windows that allowed supervisors to monitor traffic in all directions. This suggested that it might also have access to the ship's communication systems. Marcus studied the area carefully, looking for any advantage he could exploit. The guards were focused on coordinating the response to the prison break, with multiple teams receiving orders and deploying to various locations throughout the ship. Their attention was entirely directed inward toward containing the escaped prisoners. That gave Marcus an idea that was either brilliant or suicidal. Instead of trying to sneak past the guards, Marcus walked directly toward the command center with the confident stride of someone who belonged there. His prison clothing might mark him as an escaped prisoner, but his behavior and demeanor suggested someone with authority and purpose. He had learned during his military career that acting like you belonged somewhere was often more effective than elaborate disguises or stealth. The guards barely glanced at him as he approached. They were dealing with reports of violence, sabotage, and chaos throughout the ship. A single human walking calmly through the corridors did not register as a priority threat compared to the crystalline beings who could shatter steel with their voices or the energy entities who were overloading power systems just by existing. Marcus reached the command center entrance and waited. A guard emerged carrying what appeared to be additional communication equipment, and Marcus simply followed him through the security barriers as if he had every right to be there. The guard was too focused on his task to question the presence of a human who appeared calm and purposeful. Inside the command center, Marcus found himself surrounded by technology that made Earth's most advanced systems look like stone tools. Holographic displays showed three-dimensional maps of the ship, real-time tracking of thousands of prisoners, damage reports from multiple systems, and communication channels connecting the Nexus Mortis to locations throughout the galaxy. Most importantly, Marcus could see navigation displays showing the ship's current position relative to known space. The Nexus Mortis was indeed located in a pocket dimension, but the navigation systems maintained constant awareness of its relationship to normal space-time. According to the displays, the ship was currently positioned approximately 15,000 light-years from Earth in a region that galactic charts labeled as Hegemony Core Territory. Marcus memorized everything he could see while moving through the command center as if he were conducting an official inspection. The alien crews were too busy managing the crisis to pay attention to him, and the few who noticed his presence seemed to assume he was some kind of specialist brought in to help with the emergency. He was studying a communication panel when someone finally noticed that he did not belong there. "Human!" The voice came from behind him, speaking through a translation device with mechanical precision. "You should not be in this location." Marcus turned slowly, keeping his hands visible and his expression neutral. The speaker was a being he had not seen before, tall and elegant, with skin that shifted between silver and gold. The creature wore what appeared to be a uniform marking it as someone with significant authority aboard the ship. "I am conducting an assessment of the security failure," Marcus said calmly, hoping his translator would render the words appropriately. "The containment system breakdown suggests systematic vulnerabilities that require immediate analysis." The alien stared at him with eyes that held far too much intelligence. Marcus realized he was probably speaking to someone with the expertise to recognize deception, but he continued his bluff because he had no other options. "You are prisoner classification human 7742, the alien said. "You are the cause of this security failure. Your containment field was the first to fail, creating a cascade effect that disabled multiple security systems." "That analysis is correct," Marcus replied, maintaining his calm tone. which is why I am uniquely qualified to help prevent similar failures in the future. The human physiological response to quantum containment creates resonance effects that your systems cannot accommodate. The alien's skin shifted to a color that Marcus hoped indicated interest rather than aggression. Explain this phenomenon. Marcus had no idea if his improvised technical explanation would fool someone with advanced knowledge of containment technology, but he had learned during his military career that confidence could sometimes substitute for expertise. Human neural activity operates on frequencies that interfere with quantum field stability, he said. The interference patterns are subtle but cumulative. Over extended periods, they create harmonic oscillations that eventually exceed the system's ability to compensate. The alien considered this information while Marcus waited to see if he would be shot, stunned, or dragged back to a cell. Around them, the command center continued coordinating responses to escaped prisoners and system failures. The chaos was actually working in Marcus's favor by preventing anyone from focusing completely on his situation. This knowledge would be valuable for preventing future incidents, the alien said finally. However, you remain a dangerous prisoner who must be returned to containment. Marcus nodded as if he agreed completely. Obviously. But first, perhaps we should ensure that the immediate crisis is resolved. I can provide additional technical insight that might help restore ship systems more quickly. It was a desperate gamble, but Marcus had noticed something important about the command center displays. The Nexus Mortis was not just dealing with escaped prisoners. Multiple ship systems were failing in ways that suggested cascading technical problems rather than simple prisoner damage. The ship was in serious trouble, and the crew was struggling to maintain basic operations. The alien's skin shifted to deep blue, which Marcus hoped meant thoughtful consideration. Your proposal has merit, it said, but you will be monitored constantly and returned to containment once the emergency is resolved. Understood, Marcus replied. He had just bought himself time to learn more about the ship and its vulnerabilities. Whether he could turn that knowledge into an actual escape plan remained to be seen, but he was one step closer to proving that humans were far more dangerous than any alien species had yet realized. Commander Thessarian, as Marcus learned the alien's name translated, assigned him to work with the ship's chief technical officer in analyzing the cascade failures affecting the Nexus Mortis. The technical officer was a being called Vortex, whose body consisted of swirling energy patterns contained within a roughly humanoid framework. When Vortex spoke, reality seemed to vibrate around the words. The system failures extend beyond simple prisoner escape protocols, Vortex explained, projecting holographic displays that showed the ship's technical status in painful detail. Power distribution networks are experiencing harmonic interference. Life support systems are operating at 67% efficiency. Dimensional anchoring systems are fluctuating unpredictably. Marcus studied the displays with the analytical approach that had made him Earth's most effective tactical officer. The information was presented in alien symbols and concepts, but underlying patterns were becoming clear. The Nexus Mortis was not just dealing with escaped prisoners. The ship was experiencing fundamental system failures that threatened its ability to remain in dimensional space. When did these failures begin? Marcus asked. Approximately 6 standard time units ago, Vortex replied. The problems appeared to originate from the prison sections, but have spread throughout the ship's primary systems. Marcus felt a cold certainty settling in his mind. 6 standard time units would correspond roughly to when his containment field had failed. The cascade effect had begun with his escape, but it was continuing to spread in ways that suggested deeper problems than simple security breaches. May I examine the technical specifications for your quantum containment systems? Marcus asked. Vortex's energy patterns shifted to what Marcus interpreted as surprise. You possess sufficient technical knowledge to understand hegemony containment technology? Human military engineering includes extensive study of quantum field applications, Marcus replied truthfully. Our approach might differ from yours in ways that could provide useful perspective. This was true, though Marcus did not mention that human quantum technology was roughly 1,000 years behind hegemony standards. What humans lacked in advancement, they sometimes made up for with different approaches to problem solving. Earth scientists had developed theories and techniques that were crude by alien standards, but occasionally revealed insights that more advanced civilizations had overlooked. Vortex projected a new set of displays showing detailed schematics of the containment technology. Marcus studied the information with growing understanding and mounting alarm. The system was far more sophisticated than he had realized, but it also contained fundamental flaws that the designers had apparently never considered. Your containment fields operate by creating localized distortions in space-time, Marcus said slowly. Each field exists as an independent quantum system, but they're all connected through the ship's primary power grid and dimensional anchoring system. This is correct, Vortex confirmed. The design allows for efficient power distribution and coordinated operation of thousands of individual containment units. But it also means that interference in one field can propagate through the entire network, Marcus continued. If the interference patterns are harmonic with the ship's fundamental resonance frequency, they could affect every quantum system aboard the vessel. Vortex's energy patterns suddenly shifted to deep red, which Marcus hoped meant understanding rather than anger. You are suggesting that your escape triggered harmonic interference that is affecting ship-wide quantum systems? Not just my escape, Marcus said. My imprisonment. Human neural activity operates on frequencies that your designers never encountered when they built these systems. For 6 months, my bioelectric signature has been creating microscopic distortions in the quantum field matrix. The distortions were small enough to be ignored by your diagnostic systems, but they were cumulative. Marcus gestured toward the technical displays, pointing to patterns in the data that were becoming obvious once he understood what to look for. The interference has been building throughout the ship's entire quantum infrastructure. When my containment field finally failed, it didn't just free me, it triggered a resonance cascade that is destabilizing every quantum system aboard the Nexus Mortis. The realization hit both of them at the same time. The ship was not just dealing with escaped prisoners and temporary system failures. The Nexus Mortis was experiencing fundamental quantum destabilization that could result in complete dimensional collapse. If the ship lost its ability to maintain its position in folded spacetime, it would be scattered across multiple dimensions, instantly killing everyone aboard. How long do we have? Marcus asked. Vortex performed calculations that involved manipulating energy patterns in ways Marcus could not follow. At current rates of degradation, total system failure will occur in approximately 4 standard time units. 4 hours. If Marcus's understanding of hegemony timekeeping was correct. 4 hours to solve a problem that the most advanced civilization in the galaxy had never encountered, using resources and technology that Marcus barely understood. Can the resonance cascade be stopped? Marcus asked. Theoretical possibilities exist, Vortex replied. The quantum interference could be neutralized by introducing counter-harmonic frequencies into the ship's primary quantum matrix. However, calculating the precise frequencies would require computational resources beyond our current capabilities. Marcus felt the familiar clarity that came when he focused his mind on seemingly impossible tactical problems. What computational resources do you have available? The ship's primary computer networks are operating at reduced capacity due to system failures, Vortex explained. Quantum processing cores are experiencing the same harmonic interference affecting other ship systems. Available computational power is approximately 30% of normal capacity. Marcus studied the technical displays again, understanding more with each passing moment. The situation was desperate, but not necessarily hopeless. Human brains had evolved to process vast amounts of information very quickly under extreme pressure. Military tacticians like Marcus had trained their minds to function as biological computers capable of analyzing complex scenarios and finding solutions that pure logic might miss. "I need access to your ship's sensor networks and technical databases," Marcus said, "and I need to examine detailed schematics of every major system aboard the Nexus Mortis." "For what purpose?" Commander Thessarian asked, approaching their workstation with obvious concern. "To calculate counter-harmonic frequencies using human neural processing capabilities," Marcus replied. "My brain operates on the same principles that created this problem. That might allow me to solve it in ways your computer systems cannot." Thessarian's skin shifted through several colors before settling on deep purple. "You are proposing to use primitive human cognition to solve advanced quantum engineering problems?" "I'm proposing to use human pattern recognition and intuitive analysis to find solutions that purely logical systems might overlook," Marcus corrected. "Human minds excel at finding connections between apparently unrelated information. This problem requires exactly that type of thinking." Vortex's energy patterns swirled in complex configurations. "The approach has theoretical merit," the technical officer said. "Human neural architecture differs significantly from standard hegemony processing methods. Alternative computational approaches might reveal solutions invisible to conventional analysis." Marcus spent the next hour absorbing technical information at a rate that impressed even the alien crew members observing his work. The human mind's ability to rapidly process and integrate complex data was apparently exceptional even by galactic standards. Most species had developed specialized computational technology to handle advanced analysis, but humans had evolved biological processing capabilities that were remarkably flexible and powerful. As Marcus studied the ship's systems, he began to understand the full scope of the crisis facing the Nexus Mortis. The quantum interference was not limited to containment systems. It was affecting every piece of technology that relied on quantum principles, which meant virtually everything aboard the ship. Life support, propulsion, navigation, communication, and defensive systems were all experiencing degradation that would eventually prove fatal. But Marcus also began to see patterns in the interference that suggested possible solutions. The resonance cascade was not random chaos. It followed mathematical principles that could be predicted and potentially controlled. The key was understanding how human bioelectric signatures interacted with alien quantum technology at the most fundamental level. "I need to access your ship's primary quantum matrix directly," Marcus told Vortex. "That is extremely dangerous," the technical officer replied. "Direct interface with quantum processing systems requires specialized neural implants that human physiology cannot accommodate." "I don't need to interface with the systems," Marcus explained. "I need to be in close proximity to them so that my bioelectric signature can directly influence the quantum fields. If I can generate the right neural patterns, I might be able to create counter-harmonic frequencies that will neutralize the interference." Commander Thessarian stared at Marcus with undisguised amazement. "You are proposing to use your biological brain as a quantum processing unit?" "I'm proposing to use my brain as a biological frequency generator," Marcus corrected. "Human neural activity naturally produces electromagnetic patterns that interact with quantum fields. The same property that caused this problem might be the key to solving it." The next 2 hours were spent in preparation for the most dangerous experiment in the Nexus Mortis's 1,000-year history. Marcus was given access to technical schematics that revealed the ship's most closely guarded secrets, including detailed information about dimensional anchoring systems and quantum matrix architecture that no primitive species had ever been permitted to examine. As Marcus studied the information, he realized that his escape and the subsequent crisis had inadvertently provided him with knowledge that could revolutionize human understanding of advanced physics. The quantum principles used by the hegemony were not fundamentally different from the theories human scientists had proposed, but the practical applications were centuries beyond Earth's current capabilities. More importantly, Marcus was beginning to understand that human neural architecture might be uniquely suited to certain types of quantum manipulation. Most alien species had evolved cognitive systems optimized for specific types of thinking, but humans had developed remarkably flexible brains capable of rapid adaptation to new challenges. This flexibility might translate into quantum processing capabilities that even advanced civilizations had never achieved. The ship's central quantum matrix was located in a heavily shielded chamber at the core of the Nexus Mortis. When Marcus entered the chamber, he found himself surrounded by technology that seemed to exist partially outside normal space-time. Quantum processing cores floated in impossible geometries, while energy patterns flowed through dimensions that human eyes could not properly perceive. Marcus positioned himself at the center of the chamber and began the most difficult mental exercise of his life. He had to achieve perfect clarity of thought while simultaneously generating specific bioelectric patterns that would create counterharmonic frequencies in the quantum matrix. Too little activity, and the interference would continue unchecked. Too much activity, and he might trigger even more dangerous instabilities. The process required him to enter a meditative state deeper than anything he had achieved before while maintaining complete awareness of complex mathematical relationships. Marcus felt his consciousness expanding to encompass patterns of information that stretched throughout the ship's quantum infrastructure. For the first time, he truly understood the scope and sophistication of the technology that surrounded him. But he also felt something else. The fundamental harmony that connected all quantum systems, the underlying mathematical music that governed the behavior of matter and energy at the most basic level. The interference patterns that threatened the ship were not random noise. They were dissonance in a cosmic symphony that could be corrected by introducing the right harmonic elements. Marcus focused his mind and began generating the neural patterns that would restore harmony to the ship's quantum matrix. The process was exhausting and dangerous, pushing his consciousness to limits that human minds were never meant to approach. But gradually, he felt the dissonance fading as counterharmonic frequencies spread throughout the ship's systems. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, Marcus opened his eyes to find Commander Thessarian and Vortex staring at him with expressions he could not interpret. The ship around them had stopped vibrating with chaotic energy and returned to the smooth operation that indicated healthy quantum systems. "Status report," Marcus said, his voice hoarse from the effort. "All ship systems have returned to normal operational parameters," Vortex reported, the technical officer's energy patterns now glowing with what Marcus assumed was amazement. "Quantum matrix stability is at optimal levels. The resonance cascade has been completely neutralized." Commander Thessarian approached Marcus with obvious respect. "You have prevented the destruction of this vessel and the death of over 40,000 beings. Your actions today have demonstrated capabilities we did not know existed in any species." Marcus nodded, trying to process the magnitude of what had just occurred. He had not only saved the ship, he had proved that humans possessed abilities that even the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy had not imagined. The implications were staggering. "Commander," Marcus said carefully, "I believe this crisis has revealed information that both our species need to understand. Human cognitive abilities appear to have practical applications for quantum technology that could benefit the entire galactic community." "This is evident," Thessarian replied. "The question now is how to proceed. You remain a prisoner charged with war crimes, but your actions today suggest that those charges may be based on incomplete understanding of human capabilities." Marcus considered his options. He had proved human worth in spectacular fashion, but he was still thousands of light years from home aboard a prison ship, controlled by beings who had considered his species primitive just hours earlier. His immediate goal had to be returning to Earth with the knowledge he had gained. "Commander, I propose an exchange of information that could benefit both our civilizations," Marcus said. "I will provide detailed technical analysis of how human neural activity interfaces with quantum systems, including methods for preventing future interference problems. In exchange, I request transport to Earth and the opportunity to share this knowledge with human scientists." Thessarian's skin shifted through several colors, before settling on deep blue. "Your proposal has merit, but the decision is beyond my authority. Such agreements require approval from the Hegemony Council." "Then I suggest you contact them immediately," Marcus replied, "because I suspect that other human prisoners throughout Hegemony space are experiencing similar quantum interactions with your containment systems. This problem is not limited to the Nexus Mortis. The implications hit Thessarian and Vortex simultaneously. If humans could destabilize quantum systems simply through prolonged exposure, then every hegemony facility holding human prisoners was potentially at risk. The problem Marcus had solved was not an isolated incident. It was a preview of what could happen throughout hegemony space if the interaction between human neurology and alien technology was not properly understood. Within hours, the Nexus Mortis had established communication with Hegemony Central Command, and Marcus found himself speaking directly with beings who controlled the fate of entire star systems. The conversation was complex and sometimes hostile, but the evidence of Marcus's capabilities was undeniable. He had solved a problem that threatened one of their most secure installations using nothing but human cognitive abilities. The final agreement took 3 days to negotiate, but the result exceeded Marcus's most optimistic expectations. He would be returned to Earth aboard a hegemony diplomatic vessel, carrying with him detailed technical information about advanced quantum systems and formal recognition of humanity as a species with unique abilities that deserved respect rather than conquest. More importantly, the charges against Marcus were formally withdrawn, and Earth's status was changed from primitive world scheduled for integration to developing civilization with strategic value. Humanity had earned its place in the galactic community not through submission, but through demonstrated competence. As Marcus prepared to leave the Nexus Mortis, Commander Thessarian approached him with obvious respect. "Your species possesses abilities we had not imagined," the alien said. "Perhaps we were wrong to assume that technological advancement is the only measure of a civilization's worth." Marcus smiled as he thought of Earth and the reception that awaited him when he returned home with proof that humans could not only survive among the stars, but could thrive and contribute in ways that no one had anticipated. "Commander," he said, "I think you're about to discover that humans are full of surprises, and next time someone considers us primitive, they might want to remember what happened when they locked one of us in what they thought was an escape-proof prison." The mocking had stopped. Now it was time to show the galaxy what humanity could really accomplish when they stopped underestimating the species from the small blue world on the edge of nowhere.